Okay. What we've looked at so far is the idea of differentiating by outcome. We're going to come to the detail of this later. The idea is that we set open, challenging tasks for students, and every student has a bash at them. Even though they're high-order thinking, every student has a bash at them. Some students will produce very, very detailed and very well-reasoned answers. Others will produce rather wobbly ones. But we're making every student make sense, because that is the learning process. And in the middle of your table, there, I'm hoping you'll find, there's at least one set of teaching methods. And they're all on a little treasury tag. That's just to keep them together in a set. And what I'd like you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is to have a look at those and see whether they do what you think differentiation requires, which is to get the Roberts and the Robertas learning, for example. There's other aspects of differentiation as well, but we've only got a couple of hours. I think if we get the Roberts and the Robertas going, we'll have done jolly well in that time. But we've got, I'd like you to do the following. Let me explain before you start. One person, just get the set, take the treasury tag out, because that's just to hold them together. Deal them out as if they were playing cards, so that everybody's got a little pile of 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever it would be. When you've got that, I'd like you to think, with your own little pile, does it differentiate well? Is it going to get the Robert and the Susan learning well? Yeah, in which case you put it in one pile. Is it not going to differentiate rather well? Is it going to leave the Robert behind and the Susan will do okay, or maybe neither the Susan nor the Robert or whatever? So make your choice about where the teaching method goes. Each little card has got a teaching method described on it in outline. When you've done that with your own little set of cards, I'd like you, as a table, to share some ideas about the ones which differentiate best and the ones that differentiate worst. And what I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, you won't have time to sort all these cards. You've got a set of them, by the way, in your pack on page 44, 45, so you can play this game back at the ranch if you want to with colleagues. But what I'm hoping you'll do at the end of this exercise, which will take you a good 10 minutes, I'd like you to be able to tell me not necessarily where every method goes, but I'd like to know a couple of 3 really good ones and a couple of 3 really bad ones, okay? And then we're going to fix the bad ones, because actually we can. The way they're described on the pack, on the card doesn't work very well, but it'll work if you do it differently. So, get sorting. You've got about 7 minutes, okay? Got about 7 minutes. First of all, it would help to know some that you think don't differentiate very well. Who'd like to suggest one? I mean, probably don't need a microphone actually. Just call it out. One that doesn't differentiate very well. Who could call one out that's not so good? Sorry? Sorry? Watching a video. Okay, thank you very much. So watching a video. Who'd like to give us another one? Sorry, a recipe style. Another one? A demonstration. So it's coming up there. I don't know if you can see it right in the corner there, but we're putting them up there. Another one that's not so hot. A lecture, teacher talk, whatever. Another one that's not so hot. Sorry? Right, yes, so reading a piece of text. All of these have got the characteristic that Roberts or Robertas won't necessarily make sense. They don't have to make sense at the moment, the way that the methods are described on the card. But suppose we run them in a slightly different way. You'll notice, by the way, most of these methods are presenting new information to students. I mean, if you know about the present, apply, review model, the idea that to teach a topic, you've got to present new ideas, maybe demonstrate, explain, watch a video, and so on. Then the students have got to apply that learning, and then they've got to review what have we learned today, sort of thing, and reuse it a number of times in order to get there, a fully understanding. Then they're all in the present phase. They're all about input. They're all about giving information. So if we put here, say, here's the video. Here, I'll leave the recipe one out for now. The demonstration, the lecture, the reading. If we imagine that we've got to do that, and these are not bad methods. They're absolutely, we'd be lost without them. I'm using them. There's nothing wrong with them, but they do need to be used with some care. Why don't we, for example, just before we use one of those methods, why don't we, just bear with me a second, why don't we set a task? Yeah? Just before we use that method. Then the students experience the method, and then we set, this is the setting of the task, yeah, to begin with. Then the method is used, and then the task is done. Let me give you an example. Suppose the teacher wanted to teach students about the role of the district nurse again, if I can just go with that example. They could say, listen to me while I explain the role of the district nurse, and explain it. And the problem with that is the Roberts and the Robertas of this world, A, they're not likely to cognitively engage to the degree necessary to really make sense of that input. They're just not habitual sense makers. They don't naturally do that for free. But they would make sense if we required them to by setting a task first. So we say to the whole class, including Susan, of course, we say to the whole class, I'm about to explain the role of the district nurse. When I've finished, I'm going to get you into pairs. One of you will explain this, one of you will explain that. What happens then is that the Roberts and the Robertas of this world think, oh dear, I'm going to have to listen. Yeah? And because I've got to explain it to somebody else, I'm going to have to make sense of this. And so what will happen is that while you explain it, Roberts will be going through something similar to the sort of mind cognitive processes, that Susan was going through here, because he knows he's going to be held accountable, or she does, in a moment. So we set the task, then we use the video, the DVD, or the lecture, the demo, or the lecture, and then we set the task at the end. It could just be, let's say you're going to do a demonstration. You might say to students, okay, I'm going to demonstrate now how to skin a fish, or whatever it would be. When I've finished, I want you to tell me the two major things I've got to look out for from the health and safety point of view. Okay? And perhaps during the demo, you don't actually spell exactly the answer to that question out in so many terms. It's just sort of embedded in what you do. And then when you've finished, you say, okay, in pairs, each of you tell the other what were the main health and safety features. Now, again, the Roberts and Robertas of this world realize that while you're demonstrating, they have to make sense of the health and safety aspect of this, in order to be able to explain it to the person sitting next to them. And the ideal would be to give two questions and say, all the students on that side do question one and explain that to their partner. All the students on that side take question two, explain that to their partner. But don't tell them which question they're going to do until after you've done the demo. So they're watching the demo, they're looking for both your major objectives so that they can explain them to the other student. And the students love it. The weird thing is, the Roberts and the Robertas don't mind when they're cognitively engaged by you. They actually prefer it. They bore themselves silly not doing anything in your lessons or other people's lessons. And so when they're actually required to engage by this sort of strategy, it's just goal setting, it's called. And it's one of these absolutely top whack teaching methods that Robert Marzano in particular, in his research reviews, remember reviews are the most authoritative source of information, Marzano's reviews have shown that it's got an effect size about a 2-grade leap again. It's this huge improvement in students' achievement just by giving them the task in advance of the presentation of information. Before the video, you say, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. There they are, they're up on the board now. I'm going to switch the DVD on now. I'm going to watch it for 10 minutes. And when you finish, I'm going to ask you those questions. And if you harvest the answers to those questions in certain ways, you'll get everybody really thinking hard. So, what have we said? We've said that there's a, excuse me, we've said in a way that there's a ladder of tasks. Bloom's taxonomy is rather like a ladder of tasks, yeah? So we've finished with that over there. Thank you very much now. We've got a ladder of tasks now, whereby students could be set reproduction tasks, which are low on Bloom's taxonomy. And I'm not sure what page we're on here. Sorry? 41, thank you. We're on page 41, and some of the preceding stuff is obviously relevant to this, as well. You could look upon the teaching of a topic, or you could look upon a lesson. Whether it's and by the way, I've been focusing on cognitive things here, but the identical arguments go for practical learning as well. Students need to not just remember by rote how to do something, fix a trailer to the back of a tractor or whatever. They need to understand why it's done that way, so that when they hit a problem or when they come across some wacky new trailer, they'll know what to do. If you just show them by rote a whole series of procedures which they don't understand, they will not use those procedures properly. They will not know when they can get away without using them and when they have to do something else as well. They won't be able to problem solve and apply the learning. The learning won't be functional. In other words, they won't be able to use it usefully if they're just remembering by rote. So this is true of all learning, that students have got to get up to the reasoning, the sense-making level, the argument, evaluation, sort of synthesis, analysis type level in order to get to an understanding. Why do we fix that trailer onto the tractor that way? What would happen if we did it another way? What would happen if I didn't do this? What would happen if I didn't do that? Why? Yeah? Those are all reasoning questions. And if a student understands them, they'll know how to hitch a trailer on properly. And if they don't, they'll do it dangerously. Yeah? So this is true of all forms of learning, really. Okay, so looking at the teaching of any topic, it's sort of like a ladder. We start off perhaps with reproduction. Define this, just sort of facts, really. Then we go up to simple reasoning, and these are often missed out. Why is this knife better than that knife for cutting up apples? Just simple reasoning questions. Then we get up to challenging reasoning questions. Here's a large, menu of recipes. Which tools would you use if you had a minimum set in order to do a banquet in a very inaccessible and difficult place? If you had to take a minimum set of tools, what would you use? That's more reasoning, type of task. So, what we want is those ladders with all the rungs in place. And sadly, when you look at lessons, very often, or tasks or assignments, here's a humanities essay, for example. Examine the importance of full employment in a post-industrialized country. Immediately, you're evaluating, but where were the rungs that got you up there? Where were the rungs that said define unemployment? Where was the simple, what would be the major problems with unemployment? Simple reasoning questions that would help you do that more challenging task. Here's a vocational assignment often. Very simple reproduction tasks followed by a very difficult case study. And the students haven't got the simple reasoning tasks in the middle there to help them make sense of this case study and see why things are done, and therefore enable them to do them all. So we want all our rungs in place. So what I'd like to do is just ask you for a moment, have you got the rungs in place? And notice there's a very long list there, so this is a very challenging question. In your lesson activities, do you have reproduction, simple reasoning, and challenging open tasks? Because that differentiates. The Susans won't get bored if you set an open, challenging task. If you set a challenging task that's closed, i.e. you can finish it, she'll say, I finished. And then you've got to think of an extension task, perhaps, and she'll probably know it's an extension task, and she'll wonder, why am I doing this when Robert isn't? Possibly. But if you say, I want you to design a marketing strategy and I want a full justification, well, that could be a PhD. Yeah? That could be a PhD. Yeah? So when Susan does a fantastically brilliant job, absolutely stunning, and you look at it and you think, bloody hell, that's better than I could do, you can still say, I'd like you to look at that from the cost-effectiveness point of view and leave her. Right? There's another PhD you've left behind, right? And there's no way she's going to finish it. There's no way she's going to finish it. There's no way she's going to say, done, yeah? Because she's got an open channel, but she's being stretched. You've given her a mission, and she's off on it. Okay, I forgot that, yeah? Meanwhile, Robert, is having trouble remembering the 4 ways of marketing or whatever it was that you were looking at, and so he's got to get a bit more help and so on.